Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, we'll be discussing my thoughts on Series 4, Episode 1 of Sherlock, its triumphant return with the Six Thatchers. And this is going to be a spoilery discussion. I'm not going to be going in depth into every little nook and cranny in this particular episode, but I will be touching upon elements that will thoroughly spoil it for you if you haven't already seen it. I highly recommend you click off this video if you haven't. Come back at a later time once you have. Otherwise, if you've seen it already, you'll be sticking with me. Let's rock and roll. So this episode, I went into it not really actually intending to come on and then do a discussion video about it. What is my latent motif when it comes to the Sherlock series is I like to watch an entire season and then come on and sort of talk about it in a highlights kind of reference, and this episode was kind of frustrating to me. I really liked certain aspects of it. There were aspects that kind of exacerbated me a little bit. Of course, being a Sherlockian, I loved a lot of the references. I didn't pick up on every single one because it's been some time since I've actually sat down and read the original Conan Doyle canon, but there are ones that stuck out to me right in the early going. There's a reference to the Canary Trainer, which is a novel penned by Nicholas Meyer, who is a scribe as well as director in the Star Trek film universe. Also, is he going to be, one of the head writers or producers behind the new Star Trek series that is up and coming as of the time of this recording? This guy's work, I absolutely love and adore it. He even gets a sort of, Sherlock Holmes reference in Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country, who may or may not have been in Spock's bloodline, kind of thing. And he immediately references the Canary Trainer, which is the third of a trilogy of novels penned by Nicholas Meyer, which takes a lot of inspiration actually from Phantom of the Opera. It's really intriguing. This is basically during a period of Holmes's life when he is on the lam. People, the general public, assume he has been killed off by Professor Moriarty, and this is kind of retelling the events, the true events, if you will, of what was happening in Holmes's life after, for all intents and purposes, faking his death in the original canon. And, he basically lands in Paris. He becomes part of the Paris Opera House. He, plays instruments and things of that sort. Does other sort of, work behind the scenes, if you will. Ends up meeting Irene Adler all over again, and she sort of blackmails him into, helping her with certain efforts. And the whole Phantom of the Opera backdrop, it's just pretty awesome. And this is following his first novel in the trilogy, The 7% Solution, which really goes in depth into what motivated Sherlock to go on the lam to begin with, the sort of impetus for why he gained a cocaine addiction, all the reasoning behind that, the fact that Professor Moriarty, while Holmes always considered him as part of the original canon, at least in one story, Moriarty was his arch nemesis, this great, sort of kingpin of crime all over London and everything like that. Do we find a whole new persona for the Moriarty in the 7% Solution and all of that stuff? Holmes ends up having to be aided by Sigmund Freud in the story, and there's also a film version of it. And it's highly intriguing. The Canary Trainer is, as I say, the third of the novel trilogy. And there's one in there where Bram Stoker and maybe vampires have something to do with the story. And it's not actually overly supernatural. It's actually really awesome. So I highly recommend that trilogy of novels by Nicholas Meyer. And I really appreciated from right out of the gate getting that reference in. But as I say, there are a lot of references I didn't necessarily pick up on. I knew the jellyfish was a reference to a story. I vaguely remember that. And the whole idea of the Black Pearl of the Borgias, this was actually the driving sort of, MacGuffin, if you will. In the original story, this story takes inspiration from the Six Thatchers, is based on the Six Napoleons, and rather than a sort of memory drive, a memory stick, whatever you want to call it, as Sherlock finds in this contemporary version of the story, was it the Black Pearl in the original story, I believe. And stuff like that I absolutely love. As far as the modernization of this particular story and what's going on in the lives of our characters, of course, Sherlock is typical Sherlock. I love the character. I love Cumberbatch's portrayal of the character. Watson is Watson, Mary is Mary, and of course we're picking up with the birth of their child, and everything is seemingly revolving around one thing when it actually is something else. And the thing about it is, I felt there were elements to it that were largely predictable to me. There were story themes and storylines that were going on that were set up in the beginning that I just felt I was picking up on. I was being a little too perceptive on, and I don't think my being a Sherlockian really had any bearing on that whatsoever. It's just story themes that seem to jump out at you and punch out at you. The old lady at the beginning, why are we spending so much time talking to her unless she's going to become a role down the line? And, as the story sort of trundles on, I'm thinking less and less about that. I'm starting to forget about that because they kind of throw some other stuff in the mix. And I don't know if that was clever misdirection necessarily, if it just made me forget about it. But then when the other foot drops, when the, episode ends, sure enough, I was right. I had this like gobsmacked moment where I was like, oh, okay, I was right. And that was a little bit frustrating. I was also frustrated with John's seeming infidelity, if you will. I know the relationship between he and Mary has been somewhat tumultuous, the trust factor and everything like that, her history, and he seemed to really lay that to bed the last time we caught up with these characters. He burned the memory drive or flash drive, whatever it is, that was hers, the Agra drive, and said, this person you are now, I can put my faith and trust in you. And here we have him getting flirty with a chick on a bus. Now, granted, she's sort of looking at him and smiling at him, and they misdirect you to thinking, oh, it's the little flower in his hair because he was, kidding around with the baby and everything like that. But we find out afterward that, of course, she gave him her number, and he ends up texting her, and they have a conversation. It's really hard to tell what the passage of time was there, how intimate they got to know each other and everything like that. And John's about ready to call it off. He's doing the honorable thing. He should have never got into that mess to begin with. I was just really disappointed in him for doing that, in spite of what was going on, the troubles that were going on between he and Mary, which it didn't seem on the surface like was really even that much of a thing anymore. Why would he have this drive, this impetus to get to know this other person? Maybe it's his thrill seeking, now being sort of a dad, having the ball and chain of the child at home. He's not going out with Sherlock as often. He kind of has to get the wife's permission. She's better at it than he is, as they say all throughout this particular episode. And they've touted before in previous episodes. So like maybe this is his thrill seeking, going behind her back, trying to seek something vivacious, gets his juices flowing, I guess, for lack of a better term. Not that I'm excusing the behavior at all. I'm just, again, I was disappointed in the fact that he was doing this. I was intrigued, to see what exactly this woman's role was. I'm suspecting everyone. I suspected the old lady at the beginning. Why are we talking to her so much? I suspected this woman on the bus. Oh, is this going to be an agent of Moriarty's down the line that we're going to see in the absence of Mary, with how everything ends toward the finale of this particular episode? Is this going to be someone he seeks comfort in at a later time? And it turns out, oh, she rears her ugly head and reveals the fact, hey, I'm Mrs. Moriarty, something like that. I don't know. I don't know what the innocence or guilt of this character is meant to be. And it was frustrating that, like, it was almost like watching your grandparents or an uncle and aunt that you really love and have always seemed to be a nice pair. Now they're kind of sort of going their different ways. It's like, why are you doing it? You're breaking my heart. Why are you doing it? And that's really what I was feeling watching that and having those revelations hit home. I felt like that was the most impactful element of the story for me, that emotional drama that was, building up between them. And as it builds to the culmination, of course, we have the whole Six Thatchers thing. We have this misdirection. Like, why was it even there? Murder, or rather accidental death of this kid. He was going to hide in his car to pop out at his dad at a special occasion. The whole pre-recorded message. I suspected something was off with the message. The background looked like a green screen or something. I knew he wasn't in the mountains. I didn't know if somebody was going to be holding him hostage or what. But of course, they find the remains in the car and all that stuff. And, he had the fake seat over his head. They actually make those things. I don't know why. Is this a common thing? I'm going to hide in my car and pop out at you. Pranks and everything. But apparently the prank went awry. He had a seizure. He died in the car. They found him a week later, whatever it was. And so, I mean, things like that were just kind of thrown in to make you forget what you just saw with the old lady in the office. Why was she so talkative with Sherlock? Why was Sherlock acting so wonky? Where was this going to come into play down the line? Sure enough, it did. She was the mastermind, air quotes, throughout the entire thing. We thought the one lady from Doctor Who Waters of Mars episode, was the one to blame because of that whole code word ammo. And at one point he writes it down and puts it on Mycroft's desk, and I'm thinking, oh, it's backwards now. It's OMMA. What OMA? What is it? Actually a backwards anagram? Does it mean something else? It's not ammo. It was ammo the whole time. It was just the code name for this old fart, who was jealous and wanted to prove her worth. She was smarter. She was quiet. She was a Sherlock-esque character in her own right, I guess. And the whole momentum of the final scene where you have, Mary and Sherlock cornering her and finding out what the drive was behind it all, and Sherlock pressing her buttons, kind of fell a little flat to me. I was kind of like, what's going on here? And every time they keep cutting away to Mary, no, Sherlock, don't, what are you, watch out and everything. I didn't quite get it. I didn't expect the old lady to actually pull the gun and try to shoot Sherlock. That was the last thing I really expected to see happen. But at the same time, it seemed so predictable. It seemed like, the kind of thing you would see before in sort of just a traditional, nighttime drama series. And that really disappointed me when she actually pulled the trigger. Making matters worse, Mary jumps in line of fire. Now, here's the thing. Ever since Mary became involved in the series, I have suspected she would not be long for the wind. I never would have suspected they would actually, get married and impregnated, have a kid, and only then would it happen. Would the other leg drop? And even then, the whole situation of Mary's death, I'm like, okay, how is this going to be fake? She's doing a Sherlock. She's faking her death. Maybe Moriarty did. Maybe Sherlock did. We know Sherlock did at this point. Maybe Mary's doing that. Maybe, there are other agents that are in the collective out there in the world who are going to be gunning for her, much as this former partner ended up doing, AJ or whatever his name was, part of that whole Agra unit. And they figure, Sherlock figures, well, it's going to be painful. We're going to have to torture the hell out of John, but we got to get rid of her. We got to make it look like she's dead. We got to have it be genuine. And then, she comes plastic surgery'd up or something like that down the line again. But of course, I don't know. This is probably for reals and realsies or whatever. And it was disappointing to see her go out the way she went out. It was something I was just waiting for. I felt was inevitable. I felt like at some point she will die. I didn't know how it was going to play into her past. I don't feel like we got a fleshing out enough of her past. I don't feel like with all the sort of hitting you over the head with the, references to Moriarty and setting something up. I mean, is that going to have a payoff at all? Because if we already have Toby Jones coming in as another big bad of the season, which, he was absent the entire episode anyway, is he the real Moriarty? Was he in league with Moriarty? Is he helping Moriarty posthumously get back at Sherlock? Does he have anything to do with Moriarty? Does the chick on the bus? It's like I'm questioning all these things. So at least they are throwing me for a loop. They have me invested enough to actually be concerned and thinking about it. But I just felt like when that other leg dropped and Mary bit the bullet, very literally, shot through the heart, and you have that very melodramatic turn of John just getting there in the nick of time and the parting words between them. His sort of Superman 1978 Clark Kent, screaming, Christopher Reeve, that is to say, screaming at the death of Lois, which then sends him circling around the earth and twisting back time. It was not an ill performance. It was very momentous. It was very moving, and there was a lot of gravitas and weight to the performances. I just feel like the writing of it was a little wonky. It was a little misplaced, misguided perhaps, and not fulfilling. it definitely left me feeling like my parents are getting a divorce. They become estranged. Why is dad spending so much time talking to that woman over there when, mom doesn't know about it, kind of thing? And with the whole John and the girl on the bus thing, straying away from Mary, and what are his interests there? What are his motivations there? It seems like they're happy. They have the kid, whatever like that. Is he looking for that adrenaline rush? And then the whole dynamic with Sherlock where he's vowed to the very end to keep the preservation of their lives, most specifically Mary, for John because of how closely knit they are. And the falling out there, it resonates. It was like a punch to the gut. I mean, if what they were going for was an Empire Strikes Back level punch to the chops, which it was so bittersweet and so down note, then they succeeded, but I don't feel fulfilled and excited like I have watching previous episodes of this particular series. And that's really where I'm left by the end. I'm just frustrated by this. There's still a lot of overhanging unanswered questions, and the drama, the melodrama, the conflict going on between the characters, it didn't seem necessary. I mean, more so than an actual evolving plot where these characters' lives are actually being impacted by their past and criminal tendencies and investigating crimes and all these things, piecing that stuff together. It felt more like a cruel gamer playing The Sims and purposely locking a character in a bathroom and removing the toilet, and so they can't get to the fridge, which is just outside the next room, putting them through hell. And I have to sit and watch helplessly. Like, I want to help them. I want to, I want to be inspired by them. I want to feel good watching this. I want to feel rejuvenated and completely have my world rocked by some amazing thing that happens. Instead, I just kind of felt like, boom, right to the gut, right to the stomach, with a 1-2 punch. And so it's like, I'm not saying I didn't enjoy it. I enjoyed it for the most part, but at the same time, it's like, wow, why'd you do this? Mommy and Daddy Moffat and Mark Gatiss, why'd you do this to me? So, I'm not going to make any promises that I'm going to be back for the next one and discussing it episode by episode. There's only 3 in a season, so who knows? And there's a very good chance that I've heard it touted that this could be the last Sherlock we're ever going to get in this particular canon, that kind of thing. This particular series as a season, I don't know for sure. You never know what the future may hold, especially with Benny's going off as Doctor Strange, which... 2 thumbs up on that movie as a sidebar. But I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below how you felt watching this. If you sort of feel simpatico with me at all, that it was frustrating, that there were elements of it that were predictable, that, it wasn't as fulfilling as episodes past have been, whether you're Sherlockian or not, whether you just plainly love this series or not. The performances, to talk about the stuff that really stood out to me, going for the gold, the performances were spot on, were perfect. Benny, Martin Freeman, his real life wife, whose name always escapes me, I always have to jot it down, who played Mary in the show, his fictional wife and everything. I'm sorry we didn't see enough of Mrs. Hudson and such like that, background characters. We saw a little more of Lestrade, but and what's going on with Lestrade? He's trying to hook up with the ladies and everything. I don't know if the chick that was coming to ask Holmes about the Black Pearl case or anything, I don't know if that's who he was insinuating Lestrade was hooking up with, but I wouldn't mind seeing more of her. She was a very pretty lady. So yeah, let me know what you thought in the comments below. Love her to hate it, anything goes. Just love having that conversation, and it'll be interesting to see how the rest of this particular season, the 4th season of Sherlock, plays out. I can only hope it's onward and upward from here, really. So yeah, otherwise that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.